She was trapped in darkness below the mating hall, until the Alpha King's instinct pulled him down. Elara's fingers brushed against the cold stone wall, seeking some sign of life in the endless darkness. Her breaths came shallow and uneven, echoing back at her as if the dungeon itself were alive. The air was damp and heavy, carrying the scent of earth, moss, and something older, something that whispered secrets she could not yet understand. She had been here for hours, or was it days? Time had lost all meaning when the sun above was nothing but a memory, and the world of light and color existed only in her mind. Bay. The mating hall above thrummed with music, laughter, and the voices of nobles celebrating some grand ritual, their words distant and hollow from below. Every drumbeat, every cheer grated against her nerves like a reminder of her imprisonment. She pressed herself tighter against the stone, trying not to be found, trying to remind herself that hope had not yet abandoned her. Her situation was bitterly unfair. Bet. She had trusted too freely, believed too easily in the kindness of those who called themselves her allies. And now, betrayed and cast into the dark underbelly of the castle, she was left to the shadows. Yet even in the darkness, she refused to surrender. Elara's mind was sharp, her heart stubborn. Bad. Survival, she knew, required both cunning and courage, and she would not fail. A sound, soft and deliberate, stirred her from her thoughts. It was faint at first, a scraping, a whisper of movement in the distance, but enough to make her freeze. She held her breath, letting the shadows cloak her small form. The torches flickered, though none burned nearby, casting the dungeon in eerie, shifting patterns of black and gray. Something, or someone, was moving closer. Her pulse quickened, and a strange thrill mingled with her fear. She was not alone. The footsteps grew louder, deliberate, confident, and with them came a presence. It was hard to describe, yet impossible to ignore. A weight of power and authority that pressed against her very senses, tugging at something buried deep within her soul. She felt it before she saw it. A pull, magnetic and undeniable, like the invisible thread of fate tightening around her heart. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. The wall seemed to swallow it whole. There was no answer. Only the quiet shuffle of footsteps and the faintest sound of a cloak brushing the floor. Elara's instinct told her to flee, to find some narrow crevice, some hidden crack through which she could escape. But another instinct, older, harder to name, urged her to stay, to wait, to see. And somewhere deep in her chest, she felt the first stirrings of something dangerous and strange. Recognition. She did not know this presence, yet a memory, ancient and impossible, seemed to hum within her bones. Then he appeared. Auric, the Alpha King, descended into the dungeon with an ease that was almost unnatural. Even in the dim torchlight of distant halls, his presence dominated the space. Tall, imposing, with eyes that seemed to pierce the shadows themselves, he was a force the dungeon could not contain. His armor clinked softly as he moved, a sound both threatening and compelling, yet there was a tension to his steps, as if the shadows themselves resisted his passage. He paused, sensing rather than seeing her. His gaze swept the darkness, sharp and unwavering, until it settled on the faint outline of her form pressed against the wall. Their eyes met, though she barely made herself visible, and in that instant a silent conversation passed between them, a question and an answer that neither spoke aloud. She was not supposed to be here. Yet he did not hesitate. Bait. Some deep, instinctual part of him, ancient and unyielding, drew him forward. "Elara!" he said, his voice low, smooth, and commanding. There was a weight to it, the kind of authority that bent the world toward his will. Yet beneath the steel lay a question, a curiosity, a wonder, a spark that refused to be tamed.
She stiffened, her pride bristling at the sound of her name on his lips.
She did not trust him, not fully. She had learned the cruel lesson that trust was fragile, a luxury in the light that held little value in the shadows. Possessed. Yet there was something in his eyes, something raw, fierce, and unyielding, that made her pulse flutter, even as her mind screamed caution.
"I am not your prisoner," she said, though her voice lacked the conviction she wished it held.
"I do not see prisoners," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "I see those who are bound by shadows, and those shadows I do not ignore."
His words were strange and unsettling, but they carried a promise, or a threat, she could not yet name.
He stepped closer, and the shadows shifted as if retreating before him, the darkness itself acknowledging his dominion.
Elara's heart raced.
She should have felt fear, but instead a strange warmth threaded through her chest. The pull between them was undeniable, a tension that crackled like the static before a storm. She wanted to flee, to run, to hide in the endless maze of the dungeon, yet her legs would not obey, frozen in a mix of fear, awe, and something unspoken that tightened her chest with longing. Eric stopped a few paces away, his gaze scanning her from head to toe, measuring, calculating, yet not with cruelty. There was respect in the way he regarded her, and yet the dominance of his presence was undeniable. A strange mixture of power and vulnerability danced in his eyes. Vulnerability hidden beneath layers of control, as if he too were caught in the pull of forces he could barely name.
"Why are you here?" he asked, softer this time, a touch of something almost human beneath the strength. Elara's lips parted and then closed again.
The words she wanted to say clung stubbornly to her throat. She could not tell him of her betrayals, of the endless fear, of the loneliness that had begun to carve hollows in her heart. Instead, she shook her head. "Bay, I do not know," she whispered finally, her voice trembling. "I only know I cannot stay." Arik studied her for a long moment, the shadows of his expression unreadable. Breath. Then, slowly, he stepped closer, closing the gap between them, and extended a hand, not commanding, not threatening, but offering. Elara hesitated. Pride warred with instinct, fear warred with curiosity. Her hand hovered trembling inches from his, and then she felt it, the faintest pulse of energy, like the heartbeat of the dungeon itself, syncing with her own. She could not explain it. Perhaps it was magic, perhaps fate, or perhaps something older woven into the very stones beneath them. Before she could respond, a low rumble shook the dungeon. Stones rattled. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the distant sound of collapsing masonry echoed through the halls. The shadows flickered and twisted violently, as if the darkness were alive and resisting their connection. Eric's eyes darkened. He took her hand firmly now, not roughly, but with a grip that spoke of protection and promise both. "Stay close," he said, his voice carrying a strength that filled the dungeon. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Elara's heart raced. Together. The word was foreign, intoxicating, frightening. And in that instant she realized something she had not dared to hope. She was no longer alone. The rumbling grew louder, and the torches above flickered, burnt. The walls seemed to hum with ancient power. Secrets long buried, stirring awake. Elara and Arik moved cautiously, side by side, each step forward a negotiation between fear and trust. And as they descended further into the labyrinth, deeper into the unknown, the dungeon seemed to pulse in recognition of their union, a dark rhythm echoing in every stone. But then, in a sudden moment that made her gasp, The floor beneath them shifted. A hidden trap-door gave way with a grinding sound of metal and stone, and they were plunged into darkness, free-falling into the abyss below. The air rushed past them, and for a fleeting heartbeat they were weightless, suspended in terror and exhilaration. Elara clutched Eric instinctively, her breath catching in her throat. Bet, his own hand tightened around hers, anchoring them both against the darkness. When they landed, the impact was jarring, the ground beneath uneven and strange. The air here was different, charged, alive, almost singing with the resonance of something old and powerful. Elara's heart pounded, not only from the fall but from the undeniable truth she now faced. She had crossed into a realm she could not understand, guided by a force older than herself, pulled toward a destiny she had never imagined. And as the darkness closed in around them, she realized that her life, and perhaps even her heart, would never be the same again. The darkness below the dungeon swallowed them completely, yet it was not an emptiness. Bad. It was alive, humming with an energy older than the castle above, older than the mountains that cradled it. Stones glowed faintly, veins of silver threading through rock like lightning frozen in stone. The air smelled of damp earth and something wild, something ancient and awake. Elara brushed herself off as she rose, her legs shaking from the fall. Every sound echoed loudly in the cavernous space, but she found comfort in the hand gripping hers. Eric's fingers were firm and steady, a silent promise that he would not let her fall again. But, despite the fear and the strangeness of the place, the pull between them had only grown stronger, a magnetic current running through their veins.
"We need to move," Arik said, his voice low but commanding.
But there is more here than simple darkness. Stay close and trust your instincts. Elara nodded, though her pride bristled. She had survived betrayals and danger before. She did not like the idea of needing someone, even someone as powerful as Eric, and yet she could not deny the strange relief she felt at his presence. The ground beneath them was uneven, carved into jagged stone and strange, glowing patterns that pulsed faintly with light. Shadows twisted unnaturally around them, stretching and shifting as if watching, waiting. Elara's heart raced with every step. Desperation. The dungeon above had been dark, yes, but this was different. This was alive. Do you feel it? She whispered. The stones. There, moving. Herrick's eyes narrowed. Alive, yes, but not in a way meant to harm us. At least, not yet. Bay. This place responds to emotion. Fear. Anger. Desire. Everything leaves a mark here. He glanced at her, and for a moment she caught a flash of something unreadable in his eyes. Bay. Concern. Curiosity. Or something older, deeper, that even he could not name. They moved cautiously, side by side, following the faint light of the stones. As they walked, the shadows seemed to whisper, soft murmurs that rose and fell like the echo of a forgotten song. Elara's fingers itched to touch the walls, to trace the glowing veins, but every time she did, a shiver ran through her spine. The cavern felt like it was listening, aware of every thought, every heartbeat. This place. It's like it knows us, she said finally, her voice trembling.
And I don't mean just me. It knows you too.
Arik's jaw tightened, and he did not answer immediately. He did not need to.
He felt it as keenly as she did.
The pull that had guided him here, the instinct that had drawn him to the dungeon, was connected to the very bones of this place. He did not understand it, and that unsettled him. But instinct was rarely wrong.
faint sound broke the silence, a soft, slithering movement that echoed through the stone.
Elara stiffened, her breath catching. Eric moved in front of her instinctively, his hand brushing hers before gripping it tightly. "Stay behind me," he said. "No matter what comes, stay behind!" They rounded a bend in the cavern, and Alara's eyes widened. The chamber they entered was vast, far larger than anything she could have imagined, its ceiling lost in shadow. Strange, glowing flora grew along the walls and floor, delicate vines that shimmered like threads of silver, flowers that seemed to breathe, petals opening and closing as if inhaling the air. A river of black water ran through the center, reflecting the light in twisted, fractured patterns. "This is incredible," she breathed. The awe in her voice was impossible to hide. "Yes," Eric said quietly. "But, beautiful or not, it is dangerous. We must remain vigilant." A sudden movement in the shadows drew her attention. Something large and sleek slid across the floor, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. A creature born of the cavern itself, neither fully animal nor fully spirit, paused to watch them. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. Eric's hand tightened around hers again, grounding her. "Do not fear it, but do not underestimate it." The creature's gaze met theirs, and then it vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, slipping into a fissure in the stone. The encounter left a lingering unease, yet also a strange thrill. The cavern was alive, yes, but it responded to courage, to confidence, to the will to survive, and both of them had those qualities in abundance. Breath. As they moved deeper into the labyrinth, the pull between them grew stronger. Words were unnecessary. The connection was instinctual, primal, yet unspoken. Each glance, each touch of hands or fingers was electric. Elara wanted to deny it, wanted to claim independence, yet every step she took beside him deepened the bond she could not ignore.
Why did you come for me?
She asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Audic hesitated. "I did not know I would." "Not at first. But I felt you. Here." He pressed a hand to his chest. "A pull I cannot explain. It brought me down. It told me I could not leave you here." Elara's breath caught. His words were simple, yet they carried weight heavier than any sword or armor. The idea that someone as powerful as him, as feared and revered, could feel compelled to save her. It made her chest tighten in ways she had never imagined. They rounded another corner and the ground suddenly fell away beneath them again, revealing a natural bridge of stone stretching over a chasm shrouded in darkness. The wind howled up from below, carrying the scent of earth and stone and something older. Eric stopped at the edge, eyes scanning the expanse. We crossed together. One misstep, and we fall into the unknown. But I will not let that happen. Elara's stomach churned at the sight, yet she did not flinch. Something in his voice, the certainty, the calm strength, pulled her forward. She stepped onto the bridge, following his lead. Every movement required trust. Trust in him, trust in herself, and trust in something greater that had guided them here. Halfway across, a tremor shook the bridge, stones cracked, and dust fell in a thin cascade. Arik's hand shot out, gripping hers firmly, pulling her close. "Steady," he commanded, his voice firm yet gentle. We are stronger than fear. Stronger together, Bend." Elara felt warmth spread through her chest, a mix of fear, relief, and something more. something forbidden in the shadows of the cavern. She wanted to tell him, wanted to scream into the darkness that she felt the same pull he did, but the words stuck, caught in the fragile balance between pride and desire. They reached the other side safely, hearts racing. The bridge behind them seemed to vanish into mist, leaving only the path ahead, a spiral of glowing stones winding upward, disappearing into darkness that hinted at a hidden realm beyond the dungeon's grasp.
"I think this is where the true test begins," Eric said.
His eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, the world shrank to only the two of them. "Are you ready?" Alara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the cavern, the shadows, and the pull between them. "Psst, psst, I am," she said finally, and meant it. The path narrowed and shadows thickened around them. Whispers grew louder, curling around their minds, echoing fears and doubts. Memories they had buried, hopes they had long forgotten, rose to the surface. Yet in the midst of it, their hands remained clasped, their trust anchoring them against the currents of the dark. Suddenly, the ground shuddered violently. The glowing stones cracked, sending shards of light skittering across the cavern floor. A deep, resonant growl echoed from somewhere below, vibrating through the stone and into their bones. Arik stepped in front of Alara instinctively, muscles tense, eyes scanning the darkness. "Stay close. Do not let go." Alara felt a thrill of fear and anticipation, every nerve alight with adrenaline. The cavern responded to the danger, twisting, shifting, as though the darkness itself were alive and aware of them. And yet, in the midst of the peril, she realized something profound. She was not alone. He would not let her fall. And somehow, she would not let him fall, either. The growl deepened, and shadows seemed to rise from the cracks in the stone, forming shapes that moved with intent. Creatures of smoke and shadow, born of the cavern's ancient power, circled them, testing, probing, daring them to flee. Eric's hand found hers again, gripping tightly. "We face this together," he said, voice ringing with authority and something softer, something only she could feel. Alara nodded, drawing strength from the touch, the voice, the presence. Together they stepped forward into the swirling darkness, ready to face whatever trials awaited them in this hidden world. And as the shadows closed in, twisting around them like living vines, Alara realized a truth she could not deny. She had been saved. But not just by him. She had been saved by the courage she had discovered within herself, and by the bond that now tied her fate to the Alpha King. The shadow creatures dissolved as suddenly as they had appeared, retreating into the darkness from which they had emerged. The cavern seemed to exhale, leaving a heavy, vibrating silence that pressed against Alara's chest. Every heartbeat was loud, every breath sharp, yet she drew courage from Eric's steady presence at her side. The path before them twisted upward, a spiral of stone veined with glowing silver. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the cavern itself weighed them down, testing their resolve. The air shimmered, charged with ancient energy that made their skin tingle and their hair lift as though in warning. "Be alert," Arik said, his voice low and steady. "This place responds to fear as much as courage. Every thought, every feeling, it matters." Alara's hands clenched at her sides. "I feel it. It's like the stones know us, like they are alive."
"They are," Eric replied, "and they will test us."
"If we falter, we will not leave this place unchanged." As they ascended, the glow of the stones brightened, revealing shapes carved from rock and shadow. Past, figures of warriors, beasts, and long-forgotten kings loomed along the walls, their eyes hollow, their faces frozen in expressions of challenge and despair. Alara shivered, sensing the weight of history pressing down on her, the echoes of battles fought and promises broken. A sudden tremor shook the spiral path. Stones cracked beneath their feet, and the air shimmered with heat. Bay. Flames erupted along the walls, forming walls of fire that twisted and danced as though alive. The trial had begun. Ilara froze, fear gripping her throat. She had faced danger before, yet nothing like this. The fire was unnatural, dancing without consuming, yet radiating a heat that burned her from within. She felt a pulse in her chest, like the heartbeat of the cavern, and she realized that the flames were not just a threat, they were a test. Eric's hand closed over hers, pulling her forward. Do not fear the flames. Trust yourself. Trust me.
Bay. Step by step they moved through the living fire. Alara's eyes stung, sweat rolled down her forehead, and every nerve screamed to turn back.
Yet Eric's presence was a shield, a constant reassurance that they could face this together. The fire seemed to bend around him, as if recognizing the power and control he carried. She felt a thrill of awe and fear. His strength was undeniable, yet it was tempered by the care he showed her. When they reached the end of the fire, a new trial awaited. The path opened into a vast chamber filled with mirrors that stretched from floor to ceiling. Each reflection was not their own, but versions of themselves twisted by fear and doubt. Ilara's reflection sneered at her, eyes filled with panic, hands clawing at the walls. Arik's reflection loomed like a giant, face dark and cold, eyes burning with judgment. The mirrors pulsed with energy, and whispers echoed from all directions, voices that sounded like their own but twisted by accusation and shame. You are weak, you are unworthy, you cannot succeed. Ilara's knees buckled under the weight of the voices. She wanted to run, to hide, to give in to the shadows that tempted her with despair.
Yet Eric stepped forward, placing a hand on the mirror nearest to him.
His reflection flared with light, and the whispering voices faltered. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice firm but calm. "We are not what these shadows show. We are stronger. We are together." Ilara raised her eyes to meet his, and for the first time she felt a calm steadiness settle in her chest. His gaze anchored her, cutting through the lies of the reflections. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, placing her hand over the nearest mirror. The glass shimmered and warped, then cracked softly, revealing a passage beyond. The chamber faded behind them, and they emerged into a forest unlike any they had seen before. Trees glowed with pale light, their leaves shimmering silver. Rivers of luminous water wound through the roots, reflecting the stars above, even though the cavern's ceiling loomed far overhead. Strange creatures moved among the foliage, neither hostile nor welcoming, but aware of their passage. "This is Bay."
Beautiful, Ilara whispered. I've never seen anything like it.
"Beauty does not mean safety," Eric warned. His eyes scanned the glowing trees, every sense alert. This realm is alive. Bess. It tests courage, loyalty, and will. One misstep, and it will claim us. The first trial of the forest arrived in the form of a bridge of light stretching over a chasm of swirling mist. The bridge shimmered but moved like liquid beneath their feet. Each step required balance and trust, not only in themselves but in each other. Arik held her hand, guiding her. "Step where I step," he instructed. "Do not look down. Focus on the path and on me." Ilara's stomach lurched, fear threatening to overwhelm her. Yet with every step, she felt his presence steadying her, his strength becoming part of her own resolve. The bridge swayed, threatening to collapse, but together they moved, hearts pounding until they reached solid ground. No sooner had they breathed relief than a new threat emerged. Shadows rose from the river, coalescing into serpentine forms that writhed and hissed, eyes glowing with malice.
They lunged at them, testing their reflexes, coordination, and courage. Eric moved with precision, deflecting attacks with a strength and skill that seemed almost unnatural.
Bet. Elara followed, learning to anticipate the creature's movements, trusting the rhythm of their combined actions. Fear became focus. Doubt became determination, and together they overcame the shadows, their bond deepening with each shared victory. Paused. At the heart of the forest, a small glade illuminated by a single shaft of light from above. In the center lay a crystal, black and glowing, pulsing with energy that seemed to resonate with their very beings. The cavern, the fire, the mirrors, and the forest all led to this, the heart of the trial. Arik approached first, his hand hovering over the crystal. "This is the source," he said. "The curse that created this place. But it begins and ends here. We must decide how to face it." Elara felt a pull from the crystal, a tug at her chest that made her knees weak. She could feel the weight of its power, the echoes of pain and fear trapped within it. It was tempting, threatening, and yet strangely familiar.
You feel it too? Eric said, his voice soft.
It recognizes us just as we recognize it. It will demand something from us, something we must be willing to give. Bay.
"What does it want?" Elara asked, fear threading her voice. "Not just what it wants," he replied.
Bet. It wants to test us, to see if we can overcome the darkness within ourselves, the doubts, the regrets, the fears we carry. Elara looked into the crystal, and for the first time she saw not only the shadows of the world, but the shadows within herself. Moments of fear, moments of pain, moments where she had doubted her worth. Her chest ached as if the stone could touch her soul. Arik moved to her side, his hand brushing hers. "You are not alone," he said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The crystal pulsed again, brighter this time, and the shadows around them began to stir. Whispering voices rose once more, softer than before but insistent, carrying the weight of memory and loss. Bear. "One must give, one must surrender." Her mind raced with the possibilities.
Sacrifice!
Surrender? Could she? Would she? And yet, when she looked at Arik, she realized that whatever trial awaited, it was not meant to destroy them. It was meant to transform them. The crystal pulsed faster, responding to their emotions, drawing out courage, fear, trust, and longing in equal measure. Elara and Arik instinctively stepped closer, their hands entwined, their hearts beating in rhythm with the glowing stone. The trial had reached its climax. They would have to decide, face the curse together, or be consumed by the darkness within themselves. And as the forest pulsed with anticipation, Elara realized that she did not want to face it alone. Not now, not ever. The black crystal pulsed in the center of the glowing forest, as if alive, its heartbeat echoing in the chest of both Elara and Arik Pay. The energy it radiated was magnetic, drawing out their fears, doubts, and the quiet longing that had grown between them. Shadows swirled around the glade, whispering words that clawed at their minds, twisting memories and insecurities into visions of failure and loss. Elara's breath trembled. She could feel the weight of her past mistakes pressing down on her. The betrayals she had suffered, the pride she had clung to, the fear that had kept her trapped below the mating hall. And yet, beneath it all, a spark of resolve burned within her. She could not be consumed by the darkness. Not now. Not ever. Arik stepped forward, his hand brushing hers. "We face this together," he said, his voice steady, carrying a strength that seemed to push back the shadows. "We do not face it as king and prisoner. We face it as equals, together.
Elora nodded, feeling a tremor of warmth in her chest at the words. The connection between them had grown from instinct and necessity into trust and understanding.
Bah. Whatever the crystal demanded, they would meet it side by side. The crystal pulsed brighter, and the shadows converged, forming shapes of anguish and fear. Figures from the dungeon, the trials, and the forest materialized around them. Phantoms of loss, doubt, and despair. Each one moved closer, eyes glowing, voices rising in a chorus of accusation and warning. Auric placed a hand over the crystal. A shock of energy pulsed through him, forcing him to his knees. Elara rushed to support him, feeling the raw power of the stone press against her as well. The crystal was not merely a test. It was a living embodiment of every shadow they had carried. To confront it was to confront themselves.
You must release it, Eric said through gritted teeth.
Not in anger, not in fear, but in understanding. Together. Elara swallowed hard. She stepped forward, placing her hands over the crystal. The shadows hissed and writhed, pressing against her mind, dredging memories she had hoped to forget. Pain, Bess, loneliness, fear. But as her gaze met Eric's, she felt something shift. The warmth from his presence anchored her, steadying her heart, giving her courage to face the darkness. The crystal pulsed again, faster, brighter. The shadows screamed, writhing in defiance. Yet a strange harmony began to emerge. Elara felt her fears merging with Eric's strength, their combined will pushing back against the darkness. Every heartbeat, every breath, every touch of their hands intertwined with the energy of the crystal.
You are stronger than this, Eric whispered, his lips near her ear.
We are stronger together. Elara's chest tightened. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that cut through the fear. She drew in a deep breath and focused, channeling all her resolve, all her courage into the crystal. The stone flared with light, brighter than the forest itself, and the shadows screamed, twisting into streams of smoke that dissipated into the air. The ground beneath them trembled, stone shaking, leaves fluttering, rivers of light rippling with the energy released. Elara and Eric held on to each other, letting their combined will guide the power, shaping it, controlling it, mastering it. It was exhausting, terrifying, yet exhilarating, a trial of mind, body, and heart. Finally, with a last pulse of brilliance, the crystal shattered. The fragments floated into the air, dissolving into sparks of silver light that drifted like fireflies, leaving the glade calm, luminous, and serene. The shadows were gone, the whispers silenced, and the forest seemed to breathe in relief. Elara sank to her knees, overwhelmed, her chest heaving. Eric knelt beside her, his hand brushing hair from her face, eyes softening with pride in something deeper, admiration, awe, and a burgeoning tenderness that neither had fully admitted. You did it, he said, voice low and warm. We did it. We really did it. Her voice trembled, but there was a newfound strength to it. Together, Auric reached for her hand, lifting her to her feet. The pulse of the forest echoed a calm rhythm now, the energy of the trials lingering, but no longer threatening. The light of the shattered crystal had transformed the place, leaving it beautiful, radiant, and alive with quiet magic. They walked slowly toward the spiral path that would lead them back to the dungeon above, the forest around them now gentle, luminous, almost welcoming. Each step they took was lighter than the last, as if the trials had stripped away not only the shadows of the cavern but the burdens they had carried within themselves. You've changed, Auric said softly, glancing at her. Not just because of what we faced, but because of who you are.
Elara's lips curved into a small, tired smile. And you? She replied.
You've changed, too. Bay. Stronger, but not just in power. In heart. He looked at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his features before he smiled faintly. Perhaps we both needed this, to see ourselves truly. The path upward narrowed, twisting toward the familiar darkness of the dungeon above. Bane. Yet now, the shadows that had once threatened seemed different, tamed, subdued, as if acknowledging the strength they had witnessed. They emerged at last into the lower corridors, the faint sound of celebration and music from the mating hall above, reminding them of the world they had left behind. Elara paused, her hand brushing the wall, grounding herself. What happened? Do you think anyone above even knows what happened? Arik shook his head, though the corner of his mouth lifted.
No.
And it doesn't matter. The world above can wait. Bay. This is ours. They walked in silence for a while, side by side, each lost in thought. The bond between them, forged in darkness and trial, was no longer silent instinct, but a conscious, mutual trust and understanding. Their hearts beat in tandem, and though neither spoke of it, the energy between them was undeniable. A connection that would guide them long after the trials had ended. At last they reached the exit, where the mating hall loomed above. The torches burned bright, and voices rang through the corridors. The world of kings, queens, and rituals awaited them. Yet they emerged transformed, no longer the same individuals who had fallen into the dungeon. Elara took a deep breath, stepping into the light, and felt the warmth of the sun, or perhaps the reflection of it from the torches, on her skin. The air smelled different here, sharper, fresher, reminding her of the life she had nearly forgotten existed above. She turned to Arik, and their eyes met. You survived, he said softly. So did you, she replied, her voice carrying the weight of everything they had endured. For a moment the world seemed to pause. No words were needed. The trust, the understanding, and the bond they had forged spoke louder than any speech. And as the celebrations of the mating hall carried on above, they stood together in quiet triumph. Two souls who had faced the shadows and emerged stronger, wiser, and irrevocably connected. Arik offered his hand, and Elara took it, not in fear, not in submission, but in partnership. Together they stepped into the light, the echoes of the trials behind them, and the promise of a future forged in trust, courage, and shared destiny stretching before them. And though the shadows of the cavern would always linger in memory, they were no longer chains. They were reminders of strength, resilience, and the power of connection. Elara felt it in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun above. Hope, trust, and the quiet certainty that some bonds could not be broken, no matter the darkness. Arik squeezed her hand, and in that gesture was the promise of protection, loyalty, and something more. Something neither of them had fully named yet, but both had begun to understand. The mating hall above could wait, for now the world belonged to them, the survivors of darkness, the champions of their own hearts, the ones who had dared to trust, to fight, and to rise. And as they walked forward together, the first true light of dawn broke across the horizon, spilling golden rays into the corridors of the castle. The shadows had receded, not defeated, but acknowledged, and the darkness they had faced had transformed into something beautiful, something enduring, something theirs.